the fish are gasping for breath. And, you know, you get a bit of a flood on your hand. Now, the one scenario that we don't have a great backup plan for, if I'm honest, is... Hiya, Phil. So this is just some house sitting instructions for whilst we're away next week. Thank you very much for looking after the fish and the cat, obviously. Yeah, I was going to send you this on WhatsApp, but I thought, well, if I send it via the channel, then there'll be 4,000 subscribers to hold you to account, so no pressure. And anyone else that's watching this at home, this is obviously just a bit of an overview of the fish room for our friend Phil, who is very kindly looking after everything for us whilst we're away enjoying some sun. But yeah, I just wanted to give you an overview of the main thing, obviously, which is just to feed them and keep the fish and the shrimp alive and well. And then at this timestamp, I will also go through a few things down here in terms of equipment and how things are working and operating down here, just in case you hear any funny noises, you need to tinker with anything and maybe fix something if it's going wrong, just so you know roughly what's going on down here, how it all works. And then finally at this timestamp, we'll just go through a couple of emergency procedures just in case anything bad goes wrong and we need to kind of, I don't know, fix a broken tank or move some fish about or whatever. Hopefully none of that's going to happen, but yeah, we'll just go through some emergency procedures as well. So first up, this is how you feed the fish and the shrimp, and a little bit of overview of all the different tanks down here. Okay, so regular viewers will recognise these two tanks. They've both got lots of shrimp in them, and then this one over here, the 30-litre nano cube, has also got some chili rasboras. Then down here we have a sneaky peek of a new tank that's going to come out soon. This is actually an air-powered ornament, so that moss ball there actually moves up and down, which is pretty cool, but I'll leave it off for now. And in there is a couple of endlers that I'll need feeding, which we'll get to in a second. Then this tank here is a Dutch style aquascape, which I'm working on at the moment, and I'm using a Matten filter at the back there, and the substrate is all cat litter. In here we have some Amano shrimp and some dwarf corridoras. Then over here, this is probably the most exciting thing that hasn't come out yet, which is my kind of bonsai tree scape. So I've saved a bonsai tree that my godmother gave me, and it's currently growing out with a whole bunch of Monte Carlo on the top there, and then obviously the hair grass on the bottom. And in there's a whole bunch of rasboras. There's purple rasboras and harlequin rasboras, and then a couple of opistogrammas and some ottocinclus. So they all need feeding, which we'll get to in a second. And then last but not least, underneath here we also have the hospital tank. So in here there's fish, in here there's not any fish, it's just plants. But in here we have a whole bunch of neon tetras which will need feeding and will eventually be living up here. I'm just waiting for this to grow out and be ready for fish, but yeah, they'll need feeding as well. Okay, so I'll leave the foods out on the side here, nice and simple. So this one on the left, this is the first one we'll talk about. This is bee pollen. It's like a green bee kind of shrinking tablet that the shrimp love. There is a whole bunch of other ones in there as well. I've got blue bomb in there, but this is the one that we're using at the moment. It's like a kind of a greeny blue colour pellet that's got loads and loads of bee pollen in it, and the shrimp absolutely love. So I don't want you to overfeed them or anything. I do sometimes give them a couple of these, but I think just for the purposes of feeding them for the week when we're away, just give one into the shrimple, and they'll kind of dart for it pretty immediately, and then just put one into this tank. And actually, probably with this tank, put it in every couple of days. Don't put it in once a day because there's not as many shrimp in here, and that'll be a bit of an overfeed if you give them too much. I tend to just drop it down in that area there. You can see they've already found some before, and they'll find it pretty quickly. You'll see in a second they'll be devouring this one over here. There's so many shrimp in this tank. So that's that. The shrimp food, just literally just a couple of tablets once a day, no problem at all, nice and easy. So the other two foods are both for the fish. First up, we've got the Denali Colour Booster. That is sort of for every single fish, and that's the one I mostly feed. And then we've got this Serra Dried Daphnia, which I just give every couple of days just for a bit of variety. So yeah, every tank apart from the shrimple has some fish in it. There's not many fish in this tank. There's just like maybe 6 chili rasboras. So I just give them a kind of tiny kind of pinch in the top there, and they'll enjoy that. And then there's literally just 2 endlers in that tank, so just the tiniest pinch again. And then in here, all there really is in here is dwarf corries. So they kind of just like going around and getting stuff off the ground at the moment, and there's kind of a few bits of detritus and stuff already accumulating on the bottom of the tank, so wouldn't worry about them too much, but I just, for the purposes of being away, just sprinkle a little bit of food in and that'll sink to the bottom eventually, and it'll give them a little bit of extra. Most of the fish at the moment are actually down in the hospital tank because they're due to be moved across, so I give quite a big sprinkle to these guys, sort of maybe 2 pinches will be more than enough, and they'll enjoy that. Like I say, nothing in that tank, and then this tank over here needs quite a lot as well. There's quite a few rasbora in here, so literally there's a little gap in the top there, and just give them a good couple of pinches and they will go mad for it. So that's the colour booster food, and then yeah, with this one, the Daphnia, I would just alternate and do that every couple of days, give them some of this instead. When you're giving them this one, you kind of want to just slightly grind it in your hand so that it just goes down to a bit more of a powder, because it's quite big, and none of the fish that I have in these tanks are particularly big fish, so you just want to sprinkle it into a little bit more of a fine powder for them. And yeah, every couple of days you can alternate between that and the granules. Last but not least, we have the Mbuna tank upstairs in the dining room. These guys have actually just had babies, so there are a couple of babies hiding in the rocks here and a baby that is hiding over here. They'll come out when you feed them. Feeding is pretty straightforward. We've got this cichlid veggie food down here. It's kind of a larger granule version of the one downstairs. And there's actually a video of me eating this fish food on the channel somewhere. Anyway, they just like a nice big portion of it. So literally just grab a nice big portion of it. You lift up the lid here and then just chuck it in, and literally quite a big bit of it. They will pick bits off the floor as well, because they're kind of rock dwellers. They'll go and they'll grab it from wherever it lands. So don't need to worry about it all going on the floor. They will grab it, and there's plenty of little bits of dust in there that the babies will grab as well. I've seen them eating loads of it, so everyone should be fine with just a good sprinkle like that every single day, and there'll be no problems at all. Okay, so that's a bit of an overview about how to keep all the fish and shrimp alive down here. Now I'll just give you a bit of an overview of all of the gizmos and gadgets and kind of what all the different lines across the floor are doing, so that you just have an idea. If you hear any funny noises, you kind of know what's what, basically. Okay, so this tank and this tank are both currently being fed via a line of fertilizer, DIY fertilizer, which is stored down here in that pot there. So this here is a auto doser. The lines go into there, pull fertilizer out, and then there are lines around the back of here. One goes up here and goes into this fish tank, and one goes over there into that corner. It goes under the floor over there, up and then into that fish tank. So that's all automated, you don't need to worry about that. But if ever you're down here at 3 o'clock, you'll hear this kind of whir away, go sort of through its little thing, and you'll just see some drops of fertilizer go into that corner there and into that corner there. So don't need to worry about that. But if at any other time you hear anything going wrong with that, then it really shouldn't be on at any other time other than 3 o'clock every single day, which is basically just the beginning of the cycle for this fish room. All the lights come on at 3 and go off at midnight. So that's the fertilizer, and then also this tank and this tank are both CO2 dosed. So you'll see in the corner there, that's a CO2 diffuser inside the tank, and on this aquarium it's actually an inline diffuser that goes into the line of the outflow of the aquarium filter. So basically both of those are receiving CO2 there and into the filter there via this canister over here. So there's lines coming out of here. These are little drop checkers, so you will see when these are on, you'll see little drops of CO2 coming through here through the water. That's just a drop checker, but everything should be all kind of worked out perfectly. And that is on a solenoid valve. So this here is a solenoid, and that solenoid valve is attached to this smart plug here, and that's on a timer, and again everything is automated. But obviously the same sort of thing applies if you come down here and it's sort of, well, anytime when the lights aren't on and you can see any bubbles coming out of there, that shouldn't be happening. The CO2 comes on, well, it comes on 2 hours before lights go on, so it comes on at 1 o'clock. So anytime before 1 o'clock, you shouldn't see any bubbles there. And then it comes on at 1 o'clock and it goes off an hour before lights out, so about 11:30 it goes off. So if you see CO2 coming into either of these tanks at any other time, something's wrong. So basically just switch that, unplug that solenoid valve plug just there, and then that'll stop the CO2 from putting any more into the tanks, and we can just leave it off for the rest of the time if anything goes wrong, because I'll just fix it when I get back. Okay, onto filters. So this is the main filter for this tank. This is an Awase Biomaster filter. Inside that is a heater, so you should see a light on that there, and if it isn't, then that means the heater isn't on, but you know, it should be all absolutely fine. That will run all the time. It needs to be running all the time in order to filter the tank, and you do sometimes hear some kind of like whirring and kind of like air bubbles going on inside it. But it's a great filter and it works itself out, no problem. There really shouldn't be any issues with this filter whatsoever. However, if there were any issues, for example, I don't know, it got really clogged up, then essentially you switch it off at the back here. The plug system's down there, so you use that main plug will switch everything off for this system. And then this is a pre-filter, which if you unlock there and unlock there, then this whole thing will pull out. And that's probably the most likely thing that will happen, is that it could get clogged up. But again, I cleaned it last week, so it should be absolutely fine. There should be no issues whatsoever. But if there was some sort of random reason that you needed to undo and unclog the filter for some reason, then it's literally just that one there, and then that will come out of its own. And if there's anything more serious wrong, well, I'll talk you through it on the phone. But essentially, these clips on either side, they unclip, and then the whole thing comes up, and all the filter trays are underneath in this area here. But it's a really solid filter. I very much doubt that anything will go wrong with it. So this is the outflow and the inflow pipes here, and they go up the side here, up the side of the tank, and then they come in, out there and in there. So you can kind of tell that the filter is running because you can see the inflow there. There's the water line there is dropped slightly because all the water is coming in through the top there. So that is the Biomaster filter that filters this new tank here. All of the other aquariums, this one, and these ones down here, are all air powered. So this is the air pump over here, and this is all of the different outflows for all of the different air. And they're all labelled, so you can see this is the air for the 20 litre nano, and then this is the one for the new Dutch style. And you can individually kind of adjust them there. I do sometimes find that I hear like an annoying kind of high-pitched noise, especially in the Dutch style one for some reason. I think it's because I'm running 2 outlets into one, so sometimes it does a weird sort of vibrating thing, and you can just adjust the flow slightly. As long as it's pointing out like that means there is some flow, and you'll know that there is definitely flow because that is what's making this water come out of the filter there. So these are mostly sponge filters. So you've got sponge filter in the corner there, sponge filter in the corner there. This is a giant Matten filter, which is essentially one giant sponge pulling water through this gizmo here. This runs a small little sponge filter here. The Shrimper is actually not a sponge filter, it's kind of like a air-driven biological filter, so this whole level here is all being filtered through, and then it comes out at the top here. And then this is actually a weird little filter that is an undergravel filter and a sponge filter. So there's a sponge behind there, and there's also an undergravel bit to it, and then the water comes out here. Essentially, as long as you can see bubbling happening there, bubbling happening there, bubbling happening there, water coming out of there, and water coming out of here and here, then everything is fine and it's all filtering, no problem at all. This tank's pretty easy to look after. Over there is the heater. If that's green, that means everything's fine and dandy. If it goes blue, it means it's slightly low on temperature, but that will just happen this time of the year. So, and then if it goes red, it means it's slightly hot, which ironically it just literally just happened. So for some reason, it's gone up to 27.5 degrees, and it's normally supposed to be at 25. That's because of low flow, it's telling me. I'm about to do some filter maintenance on this tank today before we go, so that should all be rectified. But essentially the filter is underneath here, and if I put the light on you can see it. It's a Fluval 306 external canister filter, and it does make a little bit of noise sometimes, but you shouldn't have any issues whatsoever with that. It's all kind of attached in there at the top there, and if you do need to undo it, that's the little cap that you pull, and that will help you to take the pipes off. Figs wants to say hi. But yeah, so pretty straightforward, and hopefully won't need to do anything with this tank other than feed them, so don't worry. Also, don't worry about this. This is an old aquarium bowl which I really need to get around to redoing, but there's nothing currently in there apart from some plants, and it's not filtering either because, well, I just need to get on with redoing it and revamping it. So don't worry about the bowl at all. So all of the lights, again, are all automated. This is the light switch here. If you wanted to individually switch the lights on because you come down here and the lights aren't on, then there's just a little tab on the side here. Click that and all of the lights go off, except for this one, which is independent. But you can also say, hey Google, switch off the Project Aquarium 1.
Okay, turning Project Aquarium 1 off.
And it will do it for you automatically. So switch them on and off here, that one on Google, and essentially all the lights are automated, and they're all on this plug system here. So everything that's plugged into there is on a switch, so anything that goes into that one can't be something you want to have on all the time, because everything on there will be automated via that switch there. This is all the pills and potions pretty much, so if anything were to go wrong, which we'll get to in a second, then you may well need to use some Seachem Prime. That is a water conditioner that will remove chlorine from the water, and then everything else you probably don't need to touch, but essentially that is a beneficial bacteria type solution that will help with stabilising tanks that are suffering from new tank syndrome or that haven't got a kind of biological filter set up properly yet. This is a kind of liquid CO2 product called glutaraldehyde, which sort of helps to stop algae, and this is a cleaner for the glass. So the only one of these that I might ask you to look at if there's anything going on and any dramas would be the Seachem Prime, which I've got a bottle there. That's a new bottle, and that's an old bottle that's nearly empty, but there's still a little bit left in that, so use that one first. There's also a whole bunch of additional water treatments down here that I feasibly could ask you to rummage through if there was some sort of drama, but pretty unlikely. But a few of those black bottles are things like algicides and various other kind of water treatments, things for like cyanobacteria and that kind of thing. But again, highly unlikely that you're going to need to use any of those. And then all of those green bags at the back there, you'll definitely not need to use those, but that contains all of the white powders that make up the DIY fertilizer, which is in that bottle over there, which we talked about earlier. So very unlikely you need to use anything down here, but that's what it is anyway. This pot here contains things like pipettes and my trusty cleaning sponge. A useful little pot if you ever need anything. So if there is anything that needs dosing, then that's where the pipettes are. I'll get rid of all of this, but this is just my kind of dumping ground for cuttings and for duckweed, which kind of will in the course of a week grow pretty rapidly at the top of all of these tanks. You can see there's quite a lot already on that one and that one, so I'll probably get rid of a bit more before I leave for the week so that you have less to deal with and you don't have to worry about that. Again, it's very unlikely you have to do anything with that, but you know, I used to use that bucket there to kind of get rid of cuttings if needs be. Final little thing, so an overview of what's in all of these bits and bobs. So this one here, which you can't get to that easily, that's kind of extra food. This one here is kind of escaping supplies like glues and stuff like that. This one here contains things to do with airline and hosing and pipes and all that kind of stuff, so anything to do with the CO2 systems and the airline filter systems is in there. And then this one kind of contains things like spare sponges, and really it's just kind of a bit of a man drawer that's full of a bunch of crap, to be honest. But there's highly likely if there's any kind of scenarios where I need you to go and grab something, that they would probably be in either that one or that one. Okay, so there's only really a couple of emergency scenarios I need to prepare you for. I think one is obviously like a cracked tank and kind of, you know, water flooding out and obviously not maintaining an environment that fish can live within. The other is kind of if you see fish that are like gasping for air, that probably means there's some sort of issue with the water quality. And then the third one would be like an electric failure. So I'll just go through those now. So obviously worst case scenario, one of these tanks cracks and starts to leak, and you know, you get a bit of a flood on your hand. First things first, there's a whole bunch of pipes and buckets behind that wall there, which will help me to drain the pump with a bit of a siphon. And obviously there's towels everywhere. Yellow towels in general in this house are for aquarium use only, so just, you know, mop up all the water with the towels, no problem. And yeah, you would basically just need to try and, you know, contain the fish as quickly as possible into another tank. So there's loads of nets in there. Say that it was this one that went bad. try and net the fish out as quickly as possible. And personally, I would probably chuck them into that tank there, which is a really healthy hospital tank that's got a really established filter and could definitely take a few extra fish. Even though it's quite small, they'll be fine for the week. Or you could chuck them into there, because that's obviously a newly cycled tank that's in perfect working order now and doesn't have very many fish in it at all yet. But probably I would just chuck them in there, because then we can keep all the fish in one space and I can sort everything out when I get back. If it was that tank that was the one that cracked, obviously chuck them all into that one, I would. So yeah, that's really all you need to know. You know, obviously just about containing any kind of water spillage and shutting down the tank as quickly as possible, and obviously shutting off the filter to that tank. So if it was one of these tanks, that would mean kind of switching off the air hose down here. Oh, and the heaters. So there's a heater in every single tank, which I didn't mention earlier. But yeah, switching off the individual heater, which is all contained on that plug system there. If it was this one, then you would be switching off that filter there, and there's an additional plug for that heater. And then once that's all done, the tank's basically just like redundant, and you can just leave it until I get back. Another potential scenario is that you see fish, maybe they're right at the top here, kind of gasping for air. That probably means that there is something wrong with the water quality, and you need to conduct a water change and try and get on top of things as quickly as possible. So over here in this bit of the basement, we have a pump. And essentially that there is the vacuum bit of it. You unroll that into the room and chuck it into the tank, and then this bit here, roll upstairs out of the back door into the garden and down the drain, and then you can control with the button on the side there this pump on and off. And it's actually on a smart plug, so you'll need to first switch the smart plug on, and then you can manually control the plug, the pump there. I obviously use it on a smart app, but you won't have my phone with you, so you can't do that. But that will help you to pump out the water nice and quickly. Although if it's one of those smaller tanks, you could just use a bucket. And then I will show you how to bring the water back down here as well. Okay, so to bring water back down to the basement, you're going to want to use this hose system. And inside here should be a little gizmo for attaching to the tap. All of this is easier to do without holding a camera at the same time. Essentially pull that on as tightly as you can, much easier with two hands. And then you want to grab the drill, which is downstairs in the basement, straight ahead of you on one of the shelves there. And you want to grab this little piece here, attach that to the drill, and that will enable you to tighten up this bit here. And again, this is much easier to do with two hands, because you really want to go as tight as possible, because otherwise it may spill. Well, sorry, not spill, but push off. So what I do just to avoid any kind of issues with that as well is, whilst I'm using this system, I just put the towel over like this, which just basically means if this does pop off and start spraying everywhere, in the first instance, it sprays into the towel, and the worst bit is the first kind of like 5-10 seconds when it's just kind of gushing out because of the pressure in this tap system. But hopefully that shouldn't work if you tighten it really tightly with the drill. Then you just attach this hose to here like so, and then basically you want to have the tap system, so I'll switch it off for now, just run it into the tap for now, but essentially this is the hot tap. You want to have it halfway, then you want to have this full, and that is 25 degrees then. Let it run through a little bit until it comes out warm, and then switch it off quickly, plug everything in, and then back on again obviously, and then this will expand, and you run this down to the basement, and then you've just got a normal hose system in here, and this clips over the tank and kind of makes it nice and easy for you to just chuck it on. And then you need to put some water treatment in, which we'll go through now. So when you're adding water into any of these tanks, you also need to treat the water that you're putting in there. So whilst it's filling up, I would just grab some prime, grab a pipette, and you want to use the pipette and grab about 1 ml to 1.5 ml of Seachem Prime, and then just chuck it into the tank at the same time as you're filling it up with water, and that will dechlorinate the water and make everything fine. Just to be on the safe side, I would just put 1.5 mils into every single tank, and then you know you're absolutely fine. Technically, obviously, you need slightly less for that one, but it won't do any harm if you slightly overdose it. It's absolutely fine. So literally just fill it up with new water, and then use some Seachem Prime, and everything will be fine. Oh, and you'll want to do about 50% water changes if it's the instance where the fish are gasping for breath. Now, the one scenario that we don't have a great backup plan for, if I'm honest, is power failure, which ultimately is going to be fairly catastrophic in terms of the heaters, because there is nothing really that we can do about getting the heaters back up and running. You would need a huge battery for that. But fortunately, it is fairly warm down here in the basement, ironically, and that's because obviously it's winter right now and we're running the heating, and these are the heating pipes up here. So actually it keeps a fairly consistent 21 degrees down here in the winter time, which is going to be okay for the fish for a little while. Most of these tanks run at 25 degrees, but they'll be fine with dropping down a little bit for a while, and they should be fine. There's nothing in here like discus or anything like that require higher heats like 30 degrees. So you're just going to have to not worry about the heaters. But the one thing we do need to worry about is the filtration. Now, again, there's not really a backup for this Biomaster in terms of getting that back up and running, because it is quite power hungry. However, all of the air-driven filters I do have a backup solution for. So this is a battery-powered air pump, and there's a few of these in that drawer down there. And what these will enable you to do is to individually power the air-powered sponge filters that are in all of these tanks. And what I want you to do, if that happens with this tank, is to take the sponge filter out of this hospital tank down here that just has plants in it and put it into that tank, and then run that with one of these battery-powered pumps. That will enable us to keep that one going with a nice established sponge filter, and then you take some more of those battery powered air pumps and do similar with the sponge filters in all of these tanks. So you're going to want to find the end of the hose line down here, and then take it off of this bit down here and attach it to the end of this air pump instead, and then all of these filters will run off of battery power instead. Now, they're not huge batteries, so they're not going to last forever, but they are USB powered, and so they will power off of a battery bank. So I will leave out my mobile phone battery banks, and that will help you a little bit more. And essentially you're going to have to hope that the electric comes on within sort of 5 or 6 hours, otherwise we're really going to be in trouble. But it's a pretty infrequent thing that happens, and like I say, the backup plan is not ideal, but it's certainly better than nothing. So essentially you just want to get the sponge filters up and running again in these tanks as quickly as possible. The beneficial bacteria inside the sponges will last for sort of an hour or two without being run off of air, but any longer than that and you will start to see some die off of those beneficial bacteria, so you want to sort it out relatively quickly. And yeah, hopefully it doesn't happen, but if it does, I'd say the main thing is these ones you just leave them as they are but power them from a battery, and this one you chuck in a sponge filter out of the plant tank into there, and literally it's on a sponge suction it's on a suction cap, and you just attach to the side of the glass and away it goes. Cool. Thanks very much, Phil, for looking after the fish. Hopefully you didn't have to really watch this far because there was no emergencies and all you had to do was feed them. But if you watched it anyway, thank you. And everyone else, all of these kind of extra tanks that you've seen over the course of this video that are sort of in sort of, you know, various states of kind of development right now, they'll all be coming out pretty soon over the Christmas and New Year period. So watch this space. They're pretty exciting, and yeah, just can't wait to kind of get them all ready for you. But they're sort of all in like midpoints, I'd say. Some are sort of halfway through editing, and some are almost there, and some have got a way to go, like the Dutch tank, which needs to grow out massively. But yeah, there'll be lots of new things coming up in the next couple of months, so watch this space. Right, I'm off to enjoy some sunshine, and I'll see you in a few weeks. Cheers!
Don't forget to feed me too.